Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my wonderful sensitive friends, and welcome to what is officially episode 120. And today we're going to do something a little different, something I have never done before on this podcast, which is actually to re-release a very essential, foundational, primary, can I emphasize that enough, episode. One of the original episodes of this podcast, it was originally episode 6, and I am doing this for 2 reasons. The first reason is it's foundational. Have I said that before? What I share in this particular episode is so important. And if you've found this podcast only recently and you haven't been going in order, or if you've been with me since the beginning, it's time to re-listen or listen for the first time to this episode about our 2 brains, quote unquote, and how they work for or against love, and how you can harness them to support the relationship you want, to lead you to having, to creating the relationship you want with your significant other. So for some of you, this will be a review, an important review. So definitely have a re-listen if you've already heard this one. And for some of you, this will be new and really important content, really important understandings to have under your belt to really help flesh out and help you understand all the other podcasts, all the other episodes on this podcast. All right. And the second reason number 2, is that I am going to be taking a mini summer sabbatical from the podcast. Mind you, it won't be the whole summer, but it will be a few weeks where you won't be receiving a new episode. And I wanted to tell you that. So that's one of the reasons I'm re-releasing an old episode. And I want to highly encourage you to use these weeks to go back, if you've listened to all the episodes on this podcast, and re-listen to ones that stand out to you, ones that you think you could use a reminder on. And I'm actually going to give you a couple specific ones in a second here as suggestions. And of course, if you're new to the podcast or somewhat new, definitely use this time to listen to episodes you haven't yet gotten to. One of the things I hear from listeners and readers of my emails is that I put out so much content that, especially as highly sensitive people, it can be a lot to take in and it can be hard to stay up to date. I don't know if that's true for you, but I know I can go into information overload and I don't always want or need more information. I just need to integrate it more deeply. So let this be an opportunity for you to do that with this podcast. And in the spirit of going back to the basics, I would highly recommend these 2 specific episodes after you listen to this one. Episode 5, Lead the Love You Want. And episode 4, How to Invite More Sensitivity into Your Marriage. These are great foundational episodes like this one you're about to dive into. And I'd love for all of you to have a listen. With no further ado, let's dive in to how to work with your 2 brains for more love. I want to open today with a little parable from, you may or may not have heard this, from the Cherokees. An old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life, and he says, "A fight is going on inside me. It is a terrible fight, and it is between 2 wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." And then this man continues, "The other is good. Is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight," he says, "is going on inside you and inside every other person." Now the grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win? And the old man simply replies, the one you feed. I love this because it just sort of illustrates what is so true about us humans, which is going to sound a little weird maybe, but that we have an animal inside us. Maybe we have multiple animals. Well, maybe you can decide that by the end of this episode, how you want to think about it. Maybe we have a whole menagerie inside of us. But really, we do have this wolf of hate inside of us, this wolf of fear, right? And we also have this wolf of love. This is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about how our brain has these two parts of it, these two sides. One promotes love and one makes love very, very hard. It's very normal for us humans to get triggered, to get angry, to feel upset, right? Your irritability, when you get quickly hurt, I guess is one way of putting that, by your partner, or you get angry, or you snap at him, even all of your unhappiness in love, your unhappiness with how your husband is, your unhappiness with how you are in your marriage. I know that that's the case for so many of us. Like, not only might we be unhappy about how our partner is, but we are unhappy about or disappointed in our own self, about how we are showing up, right? Like, if we are feeling really irritable a lot, that's a place where a lot of people start to feel bad about themselves, right? That's not how they want to be. That's not how we want to be, okay? But all of this irritability, all these intense feelings that we get, our unhappiness about our partner, about ourselves, all of this, our tendency towards all of that is not personal. Meaning it's not really about you. It's not really about him. Meaning it didn't really originate in you. It didn't come from you. Okay? It came from us. It came from humans. From millions of years of our primal brain's conditioning. Okay? Which is now just playing out in you. Right? That wolf of hate, that's been part of us for all the way back to the beginnings of humans. It's not your fault, right? These ways of reacting and feeling really come from the way that you and all the rest of our brains, all the rest of our human brains, all the way back through history have been wired, right? To see the other person as a threat, the other person as bad, right? To perceive separateness and react to danger, right? To be self-centered. All of this in order to protect us, to help us survive, to help us go on living, right? So if you find yourself unhappy in your marriage, if there's lots of fighting or there's tension or, anything but tons of love and joy, that's 100% human. When we humans emerged on this planet, we already had this fearful, wanting, selfish, reactive part of us. Okay, all of us did. From hundreds of generations of ancestors, right, who are under the control of this ancient primal wiring, you inherited it, right? From all of that lineage, like, who never actually learned how to consciously work with this part of our brain, right? That's why that's there in you. It's just normal and natural. It's really not personal. It absolutely just comes from your genetic evolutionary inheritance, right? So I really want you to take that to heart. We could even just say, like, your unhappiness in love and in marriage is in huge, large part due to this genetic inheritance. This wolf in our brain. I actually don't call it that, but I liked that parable. I thought it was appropriate. So my invitation here at the beginning of this episode is to not use all of those feelings, all of your reactions, all of your unhappiness as a reason to think poorly of yourself, or tell yourself you are messed up, or that your partner is messed up, or that your marriage is. your reactivity and unhappiness and irritability, your resentment, your arguments, all of that stuff, it doesn't mean you're messed up or your partner is messed up or your marriage is. It doesn't mean that. It just means we have this creature inside that we need to learn how to work with, okay? So that we can get ourselves over more into that wolf of love place. That's not something we were taught. That's not something that comes natural, okay? So it's not our fault that we have that part of us and that we don't know how to work with it, right? But it is our responsibility if we want a great marriage or even an okay marriage. It is our responsibility to work with this part of our humanness. Really to take it under our wing, this creature inside, and guide it. Okay, so that can work for us instead of against us, so that we can work for love in our life instead of against it. Because we really don't want this creature within. I keep laughing at calling it a creature. It's a new way for me to think about it. We don't want this primal, ancient part of us to be leading the show. You don't want that to be leading your life and your love life, right? Because it will create more and more suffering in your relationship when you don't know how to work with it. All right. So my hope for you is that now that you're aware, you've heard this little spiel of mine, that these kind of tendencies these sort of negative tendencies, feelings and behaviors, like they don't come from you personally. They're sort of part of the human lineage. I'm hoping that you'll feel a little bit more acceptance and maybe more forgiveness towards this part of you and maybe even towards your relationship and the state of your relationship. Because like, I know for sure, like, especially as highly sensitive people, feeling bad about how we show up is like feeling bad about our less than ideal, like kind, loving behaviors. Like that's common, right? Like I said a few minutes ago, like I know one of my biggest problems in my marriage and in my first marriage, and even still at moments is that like, oh no, like I'm contributing and I'm making this hard and I'm the one creating the pain for myself and between us. And I know that's not always the case, right? But like, we don't like feeling like we're not doing our best, right? That we're not being our best. Okay, so my hope for you is that this understanding of like, oh, this is actually just how you're wired. It's how humans are wired. This negative part of us. That's like, this will allow you a little bit more of self-acceptance and a little more forgiveness towards yourself. Okay. So yes, that's a great beginning place, but also now that maybe you have a little bit more self-acceptance, maybe even a little bit more acceptance towards your partner for his ancient brain, his primal, primitive part of him. Now it's time to understand it deeper so that you can stop letting it be the master of you and your marriage and learn how to work with it. So I am going to be, of course, sharing various ways over the coming weeks and months to do that, to really sort of become the master of that part of you, and through various levels of yourself. Like we can do it through our level of our mind and through our emotions and through our physiology, right? All of those are so important. But for now, today, I really just want you to understand it a little bit more deeply and the other part of us, right? That wolf of love, in a very basic sense. So I love to think about this in that very simplistic way. It's like there's these two parts of us, right? This is definitely not anatomically correct, but I like to keep it super simple so that you can have just like this, a working understanding of your brain and how to use it or how it influences how you feel and show up in your marriage, and how to, use it to your benefit in your marriage to make your marriage so much better. So you have these two parts, right? You have the primal part, and you also have this opposite set of wirings, like this opposite way you're wired, right? And that's equally important to understand. You have the part of you basically that's wired against love, that primal part, and there's the part of your brain and body that are wired for love and connection, right? So we have in us that more recently evolved loving animal, right? This is really like the mammalian nurturer and part of us that like really evolved with the mammals, the part of us that is so much more self-aware. I mean, that self-awareness is perhaps some of that's even unique to the human being, right? But that part of us gives us this sort of mammalian part, what I like to call the wise brain. And again, I think it's mammalian, but also unique to humans. It really gives us our capacity to witness and feel compassion and empathy for what's going on around us, for people around us, to love and connect to others, right? And to communicate well, right? This is really like the most loving place in us, the most rational and conscious part of us, right? So we have that part too, not just the primal part, right? We're more than just that primal part. And so that, there's more than hope there, right? Because you can learn to like harness this part of you, this more wise, loving, mammalian, human, evolved part of you, and calm and what I like to call supervise that old ancient primal part, right? Like I have learned to do. You can learn this, and my clients have learned to do this. So I know that like it's not just this cute idea that we can learn to do this. It's a real thing. People learn to do this. So let's dive into some specifics. What actually is this ancient primal part? So I often call it the lizard brain. I call it the primal brain. You'll hear lots of different terms that I use, but basically those are my favorites. The lower brain. And playfully, I like to call it the inner lizard because it really is the reptilian brain. It's the part of you that evolved alongside lizards, right? And I find infusing this part of us with this term, this playful term, inner lizard, can be helpful because many of us have a serious relationship with this part of us. It's not our favorite part, even if we're unconscious of it. So it's fun to just create a kind of lighter relationship with it. It's a helpful way to work with it. But I also want you to know for sure that when I say the lizard brain, the inner lizard, the brain even, I'm not actually just referring to the physiological brain. It's actually like not just one part of you. It's various parts of your body and your nervous system. And I just like to call it the lizard brain or the primal brain for simplicity. Okay. So what it's actually made up of is the amygdala, the dumb vagus or the dorsal vagus. This is part of your parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system. This is part of your nervous system, the fight or flight part. The hypothalamus, the adrenal glands, and all sorts of other players too. Okay, those are some of the prime players. And what does this lizard part do? What is this lizard brain all about? It is all about protecting you from danger. And how it does that is it scans the environment, keeping a very vigilant lookout for what's going wrong and what could go wrong. Right? And it's very good at coming up with those things, at finding those things. It's always finding what's wrong. So I like to joke that this part will look at your husband and only see cheese in his mustache versus his face, right? It won't see his lips or his eyes. It'll just see the crumbs of cheese stuck in his mustache, right? And maybe it'll even chime in with this oh so helpful statement like, my husband's a gross eater. Ew, right? So yeah, like this lizard brain sees what's wrong. It is also, we'd call it the negativity bias of the brain. It includes that. You may have heard that term. It's not all that the lizard brain is, but that's definitely part of it. It sees what's wrong. It also loves to interpret other people's actions or words as threats or in a super negative way. It loves to judge and critique relentlessly. Right? It critiques others. It critiques yourself. It insists that you're too this or too that, too sensitive, too reactive. And if you've heard that from others, that's their lizard brain judging you. Okay? Right? And we do the same for others. Okay? We judge and critique. And it tends to in relationships, one of the things it does, it can kind of put our hackles up, right? As soon as your partner might forget to do something he agreed to do, for example. Or it will catastrophize about the future. It will predict the doom of your love, for example, if you just had a bad day together. Or if your partner doesn't respond enthusiastically to a request to have him make a reservation at a favorite restaurant, right? Be like, oh, this means this and this is that and we're doomed. We're not meant to be together, that kind of stuff. That's actually a very extreme example. It can be much smaller than that, just so you know. But it tends to get stuck on the bad, right? Like on that one awful thing that your partner did that you can't forgive, right? And it will watch vigilantly for any hint of the possibility of that happening again, right? I know some of you could probably relate to that. The lizard tends to have its eyes peeled for what's missing and what's lacking, like words of affection or flowers from him on your birthday, right? Or noticing your own inadequacies as a wife or a woman, right? Really, it just gets you focusing on how you're falling short, on how he's falling short. And it might even tell you that you've chose the wrong partner, right? Or that you are the wrong partner, or that you're wrong for being a certain way, right? So all of these things that the lizard does, really it will lead to you feeling negative emotion, either chronic, low grade, or very strong flare-ups of emotion. And it will obviously not be very conducive. It's not helpful. It will lead to behaviors from all those strong negative feelings that are not love promoting, that do not create more love, that create more distance, right? Like blame, control, shouting, arguments, not listening to one another, right? Withdrawal, giving the cold shoulder, all of these things and so much more. Really, it will lead to us having patterns of interactions that take our marriages into very disconnected and unhappy places. All right, so I find pretty much without exception that when my clients first come to me, their lizard brains are highly active and highly unsupervised, right? And that's the thing. The problem is when we have an unsupervised lizard brain, when we don't know how to take care of it and guide it and work with it, right? That's when it's like a toddler with a knife, as one of my teachers says. Right? It's like this little toddler running around the house. Let's say the house is your marriage, right? Your temple of love, right? And there's this little toddler that's got this knife and it's running around the house. And I actually have seen this happen. I have 3 boys. At least one of them has done this as a toddler. It's very damaging. It's very scary. It's not good for this temple of your marriage, this temple of love for the house, right? We do not want this toddler, which is such an apt analogy because this lizard brain, it really is the immature, undeveloped part of us, right? It's this way more instinctual, less conscious part of us, way less evolved part of us, right? Since it was evolved with lizards, right? Clearly, it's much more like a toddler than a grown adult. So I'm guessing you don't want, this very immature, unevolved part of you running the show in your marriage, right? And so the good news is we don't have to let it. We can stop the primal brain from sitting in that driver's seat of our life, from hurting our marriages, from dictating how we think and feel and act. Okay, we don't have to be in its grips. It does not have to be in charge of us, right? But we are not going to be able to learn how to work with it well if we just suppress this part of us or deny its existence. Okay, it is there. It's part of you. It's part of me. It's even in the people in the most loving, magical, amazing marriages in the world, right? Because it is human. We will never get it out of us. But we can learn to work with it so well. And we do that by purposefully calling on our wise brain. So what is the wise brain? What is this other wonderful part of us? Well, again, this is not like anatomically correct, but I lump a bunch of things into it in our body, mind, and heart and brain, all of this, right? It's different parts of us. But some of what it actually is, like physiologically, anatomically, is the neocortex, the insula in our brain, the hippocampus, the smart vagus, or what's also called the ventral vagus. This is, a more mammalian part of our parasympathetic nervous system, not the quite as ancient part of our parasympathetic nervous system. All right. And so the wise brain also includes the right brain and the left brain and more. I won't go into any more depth in that for now, but really this part of us is the wise, rational, perspective taking, big picture seeing part. The part that, has no trouble seeing sort of neutrally or without judgment, the part that can notice what's going on, like the part that can actually just step back and see and witness what's going on. You may have heard this, part of this is like the witness. I like to call it the witness, the part of us that can witness, that can know that we're doing something, that can see ourselves, right, as we react, for example. It's also the part that can see the positive, right? That can see what's good enough, what's sufficient, that can see your own and others' capabilities and goodness and strengths. I like to think this part of us is kind of like our wise advisor, right? That we can actually like go to that part of us to make brilliant, wonderful choices for our life and our love lives that can guide us into having more of what we want in our lives and our marriages. So like, if you remember the mustache with the cheese on it and how you just like were noticing that when you're in your lizard brain, well, when you're in your wise brain, what you see instead of the cheese on your husband's mustache is the luscious fullness of his lips and the like sparkle of his eyes, right? And the goodness behind those eyes. You don't care about the cheese, right? So this part's the part that can forgive and appreciate and accept and communicate with respect and, come up with creative solutions to challenges, make good choices. The part of you that can be humble and nurturing and respectful and loving, all the things required for harmonious, loving marriages. So I'd like to offer just a little example of sort of the two parts of the brain, the primal lizard brain and the wise brain operating in my life, just so you can see like this happens for me too. So, with my first husband, my lizard brain loved to tell me that he's just like one of the kids. We had 2 kids together. And, oftentimes my lizard brain would be like, oh, you've got 3 kids. Your husband and your 2 boys, right? When I thought like that, I did not feel good, right? I bet some of you can totally relate to this feeling. I get this a lot from women. I feel like I'm his mom, right? Who wants to feel like your husband's mom? None of us, right? So like passion, burden, right? That's not a good recipe for an amazing marriage, now is it, right? So here's the thing. Now, in my wonderful, amazing marriage, my brain still tells me sometimes that he's just like one of the kids, right? And it's this negative connotation. Thank you, lizard brain. And it happens a lot when I see him like being a little reactive himself. Like when he's being taken over by his lizard brain, my lizard brain is like, oh, he's a kid, right? So when my lizard brain says that to me, feelings come up again, right? Not so good feelings that I don't necessarily want to be having in my marriage. Burden, resentment, you know the spiel. But here's the difference between in the past and now. Now I know that those thoughts are just a reaction of my primal brain, right? It's just the lizard brain talking away at me, and that I don't have to listen to it. And by calling on the part of me that can even notice that that's the primal brain, that's the lizard chiming up, I can, just by calling on that part of me that can notice, that interrupts the whole cycle of feelings and reactions that might ensue if I didn't recognize that that was my primal brain, right? So just noticing that my primal brain is doing its thing is so powerful. Yeah? Accepting that that part of me is there and that it's just doing its thing, I can be like, oh, here's my lizard creature coming out again. Yep. Hello. It's kind of like, all right, and now what, right? So that really frees me up to get back even more into my wiser brain. And from there, my wise brain easily can remind me that there's a million ways in which my husband is not like a child, that he's a grown and mature adult, right? With so many of the attributes of an amazing husband and lover. Right. And I can even go further than that, right? My wise brain can easily then go to I actually love parts of his youthfulness, right? There's something wonderful about some of his childish nature, right? I love the playful sparkle in his eyes and his goofy jokes, right? And getting that wise brain back online, back in the driver's seat, gets me back to, feeling love and respect and appreciation, deep appreciation for him. And that is where much yummier, loving interactions can come from, or at least not falling into those, fights and reactive, hard interactions that would be so easy to fall into without bringing my wise brain on board. So I want to offer you some keys to working with your lizard brain. I'm just going to offer you a wee little bit to get you started. There's lots more ways to work with this and to get yourself back to living from that wiser part of you, that love promoting part of you. But for now, really all I want for you to start developing in yourself is this awareness, right? That you've been introduced to today. The education that I've given you today is making you aware of your lizard brain, and also hopefully providing a little bit of compassion for it, right? It's only doing its job, right? Of trying to keep you safe. And really it's trying to protect you from tigers, right? Because way back in the day, that's what we were worried about. That's what that's what our brains were built around, is keeping us alive, keeping threats out, right? And now it's just a little bit confused in this modern time when we really don't have that threat of tigers anymore. And it sort of goes haywire. It kind of backfires in love relationships. But really it's trying to protect you. So what I'd advise for you is just to start paying attention, just to start noticing those lizard brain activities, right? The way the lizard shows up in your life, right? Different types of ways it's judging, just if you want a reminder of that, go back to that part of the podcast where I talked about this is what happens when the lizard brain is going at it, right? It interprets things in negative ways, it catastrophizes, it worries, it criticizes, it sees what's wrong with you and him. So start noticing those thoughts, lizard brain thoughts that are going through your mind, okay? And you can even label it oh, yep, there's my lizard again. That's that ancient self, that self-protecting creature, right? That ancient self-protecting creature inside of me that's acting up. And really, that's all you need to do for now is start to be aware of when it comes in. Because even that is going to shift you a little bit out of the lizard brain, out of its grip, and more into that wiser part of you, right? That witness part of you. And from there, it's much easier to do more of the work to get you into your wise brain. And we'll get to more of those later, more of those ways. But, the more awareness you have, the better of this lizard brain. And I would advise the same thing for if you start to have like a strong emotional reaction, a strong visceral reaction to something your husband says or does, like something negative, right? And you start to feel, strong negative emotion. I want you to just notice that as well. And really even just I invite you to stop and appreciate that your body is having, like your primal body, your primal brain is having a reaction. Okay, it's like, oh yeah, here's this animal inside me again. Here's this lizard inside of me again. Like you can even say that, right? And again, that's gonna leave you just a little bit more freedom to step back towards the wiser part of you, where you can actually navigate that situation with so much more grace and so much more ease. It's really getting you back a little bit more in charge of yourself and your experience in your marriage. So your capacity for having an ever-deepening culture of love in your own home and marriage is only as great as your capacity to find your way back to the conscious, loving, wise part of you. The part of you that can not just love your partner, but also the part of you that can love this being with these ears that you're listening to this podcast with, this being that you yourself are. So important. Let me say it again. Your capacity for having an ever-deepening culture of love in your own marriage is only as great as your capacity to find your way back to the conscious, loving, wise part of your brain. Okay? And this is really especially true as a sensitive person because that part of you, that wise part of you, is so powerful and naturally so amazing at inviting you and your partner into more and more reciprocal, deep love. And that really just starts by becoming more conscious of when that ancient primal programming is kind of rearing its head. And giving that part of you a little grace, a little compassion, knowing that it's just doing what it was designed to do, trying to help you the best it knows how, even if it's a little confused. All right, have a great week. Be oh so well. Hey, did you know that as a coach, I have the tools to get you out of the trenches of being driven by that ancient primal wiring in you, that wolf of hate or irritation or resentment or whatever it is for you, and to help you live and love from your wise, conscious, most evolved, loving self. So if you want to dive into this deeply and completely learn how to not only supervise that primal part of you that tends to take over and sabotage your marriage, but to also be completely in charge of that part of you that knows naturally how to bring more love and connection right into the heart of your marriage, I invite you to get in line for the next round of Treasured, which is my marriage coaching program for highly sensitive women. Get yourself on the wait list. I have put the direct link to get on my wait list in the show notes, or you can head over to my website, www.lifeisworthloving.com, and click the Work With Me Treasured button, and there's a button in that description page where you'll get to learn all about it, and the button there will lead you directly to the wait list sign-up sheet. When you coach with me in Treasured, you will become the loving master of your primal brain instead of letting it be the master of you and your relationship. And from there, you'll be able to make your marriage not just easier, but also so much more loving, light, connected, dare I say delightful, and so secure. So hop on the waitlist for that and you'll get first dibs to enroll in the next round of Treasured.